If I can have your attention, call this meeting to order. This is meeting number 9 of the Board of Internal Economy's meeting of the 44th Parliament. We'll start off with number 1, minutes of previous meeting. Are there any questions or points arising? Mr. Broussard.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I spilt my coffee here. So the only thing that I noticed on the decision on remote interpretation services, you may want to note that the minutes are missing a reference to the board's preference for the use of the Translation Bureau employees and freelancers. After your proposal that only Bureau staff be used, Mr. Holland had suggested that the board could express a preference as a compromise, and we did. So otherwise, I have nothing else to raise on the minutes.
Okay, we'll make sure that adjustment's made. Everybody's in favor of that? Everybody's fine? Very good. Anything else on the minutes of the previous meetings? Or est-ce qu'il y a des questions sur le procès verbal de la réunion précédente?
Any questions on the previous meetings? So we'll continue with the number 2. Business arising from previous meeting. Any comments? Okay.
The Joint Interparliamentary Council, Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, the 49th, la 49e
49th annual session of the FPA from in July of 2024. Our presenter today will be Mr. Francis Drouin, Chair, Canadian Branch of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, Jeremy Leblanc, Clerk Assistant and Director General, International and Interparliamentary Affairs. Mr. Drouin. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's nice to see people in the flesh. First of all, I'd like to thank you for hearing us again on our new budget request for the Canadian branch so we can host the 49th annual session of the APF Montreal 2024. If I remember correctly, I appeared before you on October 8, 2020 in order to make the same request, but for the 47th annual meeting in 2022. But the health situation, which has affected all of us, put an end to our desire to host this event, which should have taken place next week. Indeed, the Executive Committee of the Canadian Branch decided on January 19th that given the risks that we would push this meeting to 2024. I'm therefore before you to present you with an update on our budget for the same event held in the same city, but this time in 2024. Most of the increases for 2024 are because of logistic costs and costs related to audiovisual material and transportation. There were a series of mergers and acquisitions that occurred during the pandemic amongst the Canadian audiovisual industry, and then we have to deal with inflation, which has caused the cost of these services to rise. We have also included in the meetings of the Association des Secrétaires Généraux des Parlements Francophones, as well as meetings for the Francophone Youth Parliament. These meetings will be held in parallel with the annual session. I can assure you that, like the previous request, we will ensure that public monies will be spent as judiciously and efficiently as possible. Any comments or observations? Mr. Broussard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The last couple of years, the board approved $1.35 million budget for the 2022 annual session, plus a further $100,000 for the Parlement des Jeunes, which were really relocated. How much of those budgets were spent before the 2022 annual session was relocated, if any?
Yeah, I can say the money that was spent on the organization of the conferences would have been solely for the staff salaries associated with the people working on the organization of that conference. So there was money that was set aside from surpluses in the JIC envelope, so not supplementary funds, and it would have been, I'm guessing, in the order of $100,000 to $150,000 on staff salaries, but no other expenses.
Okay.
And that's, if I can add to that, on the 19th of January, there was major decisions that we had to make. If we would have canceled in 2022, we would have incurred costs of $400,000, I believe, before December 31st, and up to $800,000 before March 8th, I believe, around those dates. So that's why we had to cancel. We just didn't know if it was going to happen or not. And spending $800,000 for a conference that may not happen was too risky for us.
Okay, glad to hear that. The other question I have is, during the 2020 board conversation, there was a discussion about maybe switching to a hybrid or virtual arrangement if necessary. That didn't happen. Why?
So Canada does not organize the virtual conference. That would be up to the International Secretariat. And the why we wanted to host the 2020, every 6 years, Canada, the host countries are asked to host the annual session. And Canada is taking the international presidency in year 2022, 2023, and 2024. So starting in July. So that's why we want to be the host country. And we've looked at year 2023, but I understand that administration will be occupied in organizing another conference. So it was too much pressure on the staff.
That's it, Mr. Speaker. Merci, Monsieur Dudon.
Very good. Are there any other questions? D'autres questions? Tout est bon?
Any further questions? So we have a recommendation. Does everyone agree with the recommendation today? Perfect. So you have our approval. So we will now continue with number 4. This is the Pay Equity Act.
Michelle Laframboise, Chief Human Resource Officer. Madame Laframboise.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with provide the board with information on the impact of the Pay Equity Act for MPs and House officers in their role as employers, and on measures taken by the House administration to help them respect their obligations. As you know, the purpose of this act is to reach and maintain pay equity using proactive measures to rectify gender-based discrimination that tarnishes the practices and compensation systems of employers. House officers and MPs have at least 10 employees that are who must prepare as a pay equity plan.
Did in November 2021. And much like with the implementation of Bill C-65 in the Canada Labour Code, the House will assist impacted members and House officers in meeting their upcoming obligations, particularly in regards to the creation of a pay equity plan and subsequent reporting requirements. The administration will support the members by providing expertise and guidance in analysis, benchmarking, and consultation, as well as the development of tools, training, and material. And we will assist in maintaining pay equity in the workplace. Throughout the implementation of the Pay Equity Act, the administration will prepare and send communication products to members and their employees to keep them informed of their responsibilities and obligations. Finalement, l'administration appuiera les députés avec la mise.
Finally, the administration will support MPs with the implementation of pay equity plans by providing a plan model and help them maintain pay equity in the workplace and to meet any requirements with respect to declarations or mandatory reviews of plans. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Do we have any questions or comments?
Mr. Bossard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci pour la présentation aussi.
Thank you for your presentation.
A series of questions, one related to House officers and their employer obligations when things transfer or reset within those offices, and when there is a change of the House officer. For example, our party will be electing a new leader in September. Would that new leader start a new 3-year clock, or would it carry on with the one which started previously under Mr. O'Toole last August? How would that work under this system?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question, and it's part of the scenarios that we're going to have to consider as we move forward in the project. So technically, when a leader changes, it's a new employer, and we have to, there might be a shift in the workforce, there might be new employees, so it's really a scenario that we're going to have to work with as we work through the implementation to see how that's going to impact, because it's not something that is sort of, c'est pas prévu, it's not assumed in the law. So one of the things that we are looking at, and we're working with our legal services team as well going forward to see how that's going to impact the change.
And I assume that's going to be part of the communication process that you
Absolutely,
send out.
yeah.
Next question I have is determining an employer, whether there's an average of 10 employees. For example, we're in a summer student season, intern season, so some MPs will hire staff that has to be factored into this. How would externally paid interns, such as the parliamentary internship program, how would that work under this system as well?
So the employees who are captured under the Act, although they include constituency and Hill workers and employees on leave, do not include students and interns. And as far as the calculation, measurement is made over the previous fiscal year. So each employee count is taken at each pay period and it's averaged out over the fiscal year to see if the 10 threshold is met.
Okay. I think Mr. Calkins has a follow-up to that, but if I can continue, do you want to follow up now, or sorry, Mr. Chair? Okay. Next question I have. The Act does require that if a pay equity plan discloses any gap in compensation, that the employer must increase that compensation. And given that we work with fixed assigned budgets, in a hypothetical scenario where an employer has to increase pay but doesn't have the budget room to do it, what happens in that case?
That's a very good question. I think that it's something that we'll have to look at as we go through the process to see if adjustments need to be made. Adjustments to salaries can be made incrementally. So if there's a large change that's required, there is a significant period of time that's allowed to make those changes. They don't all have to be done right away. If the change is minor, then they are required immediately. So if there's going to be an impact on the budget, I think that that's something we'll have to look at if and when we get there.
Okay, because as you rightly mentioned, there could be some significant increases here affecting members' budgets disproportionately, for example. So that's good. And the last question I have, though the first plans need to be in place by 2024, it sounds like there are a number of steps required beforehand. When should offices subject to the Act expect to start hearing from House administration on the beginning of the necessary groundwork? What's a reasonable timeline that we can expect?
Definitely by the fall. We are currently in the process of getting some expertise and hiring the consultants necessary to help guide us through the process. So we've already started the work, and by the fall, you'll be hearing from us.
Okay, thank you for this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec Madame de Bellefeuille.
We'll continue with Madame de Bellefeuille, followed by Mr. Calkins. Madame de Bellefeuille. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have just one question. I participated in the analysis process for pay equity, and we focused a lot on job descriptions. And we know...
Madame de Bellefeuille, est-ce que vous pouvez...
Could you please begin, start over, because we missed part of your question due to a connection problem. Is it better now? Yes, good. What I was saying, Mr. Chair, is that when we analyze a job as part of this pay equity process, we have to be able to compare duties. We know that in politics it's difficult to do this. There's not even job descriptions. So how do you go about analyzing the differences between the different jobs and the responsibilities in order to determine that there is, in fact, a pay inequity between two people with the same job? It's a little complicated as an exercise. Is this the first time you have done this, or you've already acquired some experience with this in your past? Thank you for your question, Madame de Bellefeuille. Yes, I must confess it's complicated, but it's not new to us. We have descriptions for the past 20 years, so we're going to be able to work with them. The big difference with this act, however, is the way it worked before is we were able to measure pay equity before, and we could determine the value of a position, identify groups and classifications. All of these things exist already and for years now. But the difference now is that with these evaluations, we do investigations and we do big analysis, in-depth analysis when a complaint is being made. So we want analyze everything to ensure that there's pay equity now. We don't want to wait until a complaint has to be filed. So we have the tools and the experience to do this type of work. Personally, I've been doing in this field for 15 years, and I've done quite a bit of job analysis, and so we can go outside and get help if we need to get through this process. But the whole concept of pay equity and the way that we measure it, these are all tools that already exist. The job description is important, but there's also other things that we can look at. We can have a conversation with the employer. We can look at the effort that's required to do the job properly. So we do ensure that we have all the information required to establish the value assigned to the job. Thank you very much.
We'll continue. We'll
That is correct.
Very good. Are there any other questions? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions ou commentaires? Okay, very good. That was strictly for information. Everybody understands it perfectly now. I'm glad to see that. Now we'll move on to item number 5, annual report on the members of the House of Commons Workplace Harassment and Violence Prevention Policy for 2021-22. The presenter will be Michelle Laframboise, Chief Human Resource Officer. Madame Laframboise.
Merci encore, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Pleasure to be presenting to the board today the annual statistical report on the members of the House of Commons Workplace Harassment and Violence Prevention Policy for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, as is required by the policy. Over the course of this reporting period, the Human Resources Services have managed 8 complaints. Of these 8, 1 complaint was withdrawn, 1 was formally investigated, and 6 were resolved through the negotiated resolution process. 9 inquiries were also submitted to the Respectful Workplace team regarding, among other things, coaching on dealing with harassment-related situations and information on the policy and the tools available. While this number seems slightly higher than in previous years, this is not unusual following the amendments to the Canada Labour Code and the subsequent implementation of the policy, which may have served to generally increase awareness regarding the responsibilities of members of Parliament as employers and their employees to record and report occurrences of harassment. However, even with this slight increase, given the population covered, the figure remains statistically very low. Pour ce qui est de la formation,
As for training, the House Administration provides MPs with a training session, either in person or virtually, on harassment and violence prevention. It's called Promoting the Culture of Respect. From April 1st, 21 to March 31st, 2022, 14 harassment and violence prevention courses were given to MPs. All MPs from the 44th Parliament participated in this session, and it was offered to the newly elected members. House Administration provides MPs and their various employees with training related to violence and harassment prevention. Our objective is to help MPs' offices to enhance their capacity to manage conflicts and delicate situations and to provide a respectful workplace free of any form of harassment and violence. We have developed the tools and provide team leadership sessions, mental health and diversity sessions as well.
MPs to let them know that the annual report is available. The report will be announced on Twitter and will also be posted on the appropriate websites, our Commons and Source. It's my pleasure to answer your questions.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Mr. Brassard, followed by Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks again, Michelle. Your report simply notes that there were 7 of 8 complaints last year concerning multiple grounds. Are you able to break that down a little bit further for us?
So when we say multiple, that typically means there's more than one element in the complaint. So it is labeled as multiple. So it includes or can cover some of the different areas. It's not strictly harassment or strictly abuse of authority. It is, in unacceptable behaviors or a mix of the others. So the breakdown per se would mean having to try and say how much of which. So it's really just a mix. That's what we mean when we say multiple.
Okay. Now, the other question I have is 5 of 8 of last year's complaints saw that a member was the respondent to the complaint. One of the complaints has led to a formal investigation. Does that involve a member respondent?
Given the small number, we for privacy reasons, we can't divulge that information.
Okay, so I guess you can't divulge the outcome of the investigation as well?
No.
Okay, sometimes it's difficult when we're sitting in public, Mr. Speaker, to get down to understanding a little bit more about the report, so perhaps we may want to consider an in-camera session at some point. My last question, a number of allegations came to light concerning a now former member of Parliament. It was my colleague, Michelle Rempel-Garner, who wrote the clerk to ask for a review and investigation. And I believe that the board did discuss this situation in this case last autumn. Is that matter accounted for somewhere in your report?
Would have been the previous year, right?
There was no formal
Oh, that's right, yeah.
complaint.
Yeah.
There was no formal complaint? Okay. There was, one of my colleagues did write, but as a result of that letter being written, there was no formal complaint initiated, or?
I
I'm
think
just
we
trying
might be getting into some pretty
In-camera
private
stuff.
areas,
Okay.
and I think it's.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Now we'll go on to Mr. Julian, followed by Ms. Sahoda, et ensuite Madame de Bellefeuille. Mr. Julian.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this information. The awareness courses are very important. I feel that most MPs did participate. It's very important to change behaviors on Parliament Hill. So that's a very positive aspect. I agree with Mr. Brassard. I share his concerns. There are some questions that we should perhaps be asking in camera and not in a public session. But for the complaints that were filed last year, it seems to me that the number has increased. That struck me. It increased over 2021. There were 8 complaints last year. And are there any complaints, multiple complaints against one individual? Are we talking about complaints from different people? First of all, I can't go into detail as to who filed the complaint, but I would say, however, that as for regarding the statistics, the previous statistics referred to a pandemic year. People weren't at work as usual. So really, we went from 5 to 2 to 8. The increase, as I mentioned, was due in large part to the fact that a lot of training and awareness sessions were provided. And based on my experience, I've been doing this for 30 years. And when you provide training and people have more information, people have, there's a trend to see a higher number of complaints. But these complaints didn't necessarily all lead to an inquiry. One was withdrawn, and the other were resolved through a conversation, through a discussion, through negotiation, and conflict resolution. Thank you very much. So we'll continue with Ms. Ahoda.
Thank you. I know that there's been a lot of, advancement at the House of Commons when it comes to providing more information to those that work here, trying to really make this a harassment-free work environment. And in that line, I wanted to know, since this policy doesn't cover members to members, what would be your advice? I do understand that we have a unique, we're not employed in the same fashion that our employees are employed under us, and therefore there is a distinction to be made there. But I was wondering if you could help explain that a little better as to the consideration, or if there had been consideration given for ways for members to also be protected under some kind of policy if there is perhaps harassment in the workplace at that level. Or is it just the whip's jobs of the different parties to be able to monitor that and handle that? I'm just wondering if you could give me some feedback.
So as far as the policy goes, as you mentioned, the policy is designed for members as employers to provide a harassment-free workplace for themselves. Conduct between members is covered by the Code of Conduct itself, which at this time has a component for sexual harassment only. As far as how it works, it is very different than a regular workplace. I agree with you. And so whose role it is to help that. The role we play, the support we provide is through the Respectful Workplace team. We try to equip people we provide coaching, we provide training and tools on the prevention side, as well as the support side to help people who come forward and who might be dealing with a harassment situation. And those tools are available to any member who requires them. As far as the relationship between them, that is something that is done differently depending on where you are. It's not something that that the administration manages.
But there's no formal policy. The code, like you said, only covers sexual harassment and not harassment generally. Would you have any thoughts as to whether the code should be expanded, or without a policy, are you able to effectively guide those individuals that might have been coming to you? I've been approached by a few people, and therefore I'm asking these questions today.
Really, we provide the support that we can within the realm of the policy framework that we have and the role that we play. Anything more than that, I think, is a conversation for the stakeholders and the board to have.
Okay. Has that conversation taken place previously that you know of, or that anyone here can?
Not in the time that I've been here, but I still feel fairly new. So.
Well, you have a lot of experience after 30 years. Thank you.
Very good. Monsieur Dufresne, est-ce que
So
vous avez quelque chose à ajouter?
Mr.
In the policy, it indicates that the following parties may file a complaint under this policy, and then an employee of a member. So a member can't file a complaint against another member under this policy, but it can raise concerns of other nature with the administration, and then those would be looked at to see if they fit under this regime. But in terms of member to member, it is only the code that has been developed, as you know, by PROC, and covers sexual harassment.
Parfait. Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec Madame de Bellefeuille.
We'll continue with Madame de Bellefeuille. Madame de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have a clear answer. I know that all the MPs have taken the training, and that's very beneficial. And I think that the Human Resources team is to be congratulated by including this aspect in the new MP orientation session. So it's good that they get this right at the start with their orientation. I may be mistaken, but I think that the Act obliges all employees to get this training 3 months after their hiring. That's right. The employees have to take this training too. So I'm a bit surprised. I see the number of participants in the training sessions, 35 More than that, how does the House administration deal with follow-up amongst over 365 MP offices? There's a lot of rotation, a lot of people change offices. We have people in our riding as well. How do you go about ensuring that all new employees do get this training and comply with the code? Is there any way to support the MP's offices and to remind them that there are mandatory sessions offered to employees? Thank you, Madame de Bellefeuille. In the employee orientation program, we have added regular follow-up for new employees to ensure that they do, in fact, take this mandatory training. And as you said, there is a lot of turnover in MP's offices, so we do follow-up. We also have the WHIP's office who contacts us to do follow-up with MP's offices to ensure everybody participates. Thank you. So there is follow-up in each WHIP's office to ensure that employees who have been there for at least 3 months register for the training and comply with the Act. Yes, thank you very much.
Est-ce qu'on a d'autres questions?
Are there any further questions? So we will continue with number 6, temporary COVID-19 financial policies, where presenters are Mr. Paul Saint-Georges, Chief Financial Officer, and Jose Fernandez, Deputy Chief Financial Officer.
Je vous laisse la parole.
The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking to you today for the purpose of obtaining the board's approval to extend 2 temporary policies that were implemented to help MPs meet the challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which are expiring on June 30th, 2022. I am also informing the board that the administration has extended the offer of antigen tests until March 31st, 2023. The first temporary policies enables MPs to include in their advertising and other printed documents messages and requests for donations tied to COVID-19. Since the pandemic is constantly changing, the administration is recommending to the board to continue enabling MPs to continue with this practice until March 31st, 2023. The second temporary policy pertains to the reimbursement of internet costs incurred by employees and MPs. In the light of our research, we discovered that 30% of MPs use this policy during 2021-22 compared to 42% for the previous year. Since this policy has an impact on MPs' employees who are teleworking, the administration is recommending that it also be extended until March 31st, 2023.
The pandemic and the fact that some employees continue to telework, the extension of these temporary policies would provide members with the flexibility to communicate COVID-19 related messages to their constituents and to reimburse reasonable internet costs incurred by their employees. I also want to report that the administration has extended the availability of the rapid antigen tests until March 31st, 2023, with an annual budget cap of $1,800, which is the annualized amount per member for the full fiscal year. The cap for House officers and National Caucus research offices would also be adjusted accordingly. Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Questions, commentaires? Mr. Brassard, followed by Mr. Julian. Monsieur Brassard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rapid test submission that was approved this winter contemplated $1.2 million in expenses during the last fiscal year. Can you confirm what the actual final cost was?
Sure, I could give you an estimate as we're closing our books at this time. So we issued about 204 in total. And when I say issued, 82 was dispersed from the House and 122 was actually purchased by the members. Therefore, the total that we spent of that was only just under $100,000.
Okay, when you said 204 and 122, I would have thought it was 204,000, but.
No, sorry, 204 units were
Units.
actually, that's
Okay,
correct. yeah.
Okay, and 122. Okay, I may have some more questions. I'll come back to that, Mr. Chair.
Now we'll go on to Mr. Julian. Mr. Julian.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the report. I support the recommendations. 260 Canadians died in the last week from COVID-related causes, and so I know there is a tendency to want to turn the page and just pretend COVID isn't out there. It is killing Canadians every day, still, as we know. And the reality is that there are new variants that may as well be problematic and may lead, unfortunately, to an increase in that death toll. The idea of wearing masks is something that I think we have all agreed to. The idea that we would continue some of the other COVID financial measures makes sense as well. Being able to provide information in our constituencies is fundamentally important. Providing support for donations of charities that have been working to ensure that in communities, people have been impacted by COVID. And it's not just the virus. It's the fact that so many people have suffered economic dislocation as a result as well. All of those things seem to be smart measures to take, not only with the current situation where we are continue to lose Canadians, but also in anticipation of other measures that we may have to take. So I support the recommendations, and I believe we have to continue to be prudent as we work through the coming weeks and months. The idea that this is simply over is not true. Prudent public health measures, making sure that our constituents are aware of both programs that may emerge or of issues related to COVID in the constituency, just make good common sense.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Basal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in doing the quick math on the report, it tells me that 15% of MPs have continued acquiring test kits. Now, let's assume, I'm going to take our party and the Bloc Party out of it. Let's suppose it was the Liberals and the NDP, which isn't actually the case. That would still mean that more than 2/3 of MPs from those two parties, for example, aren't even bothering to have test kits available to their own staff. Would that number sort of be accurate in your opinion, or?
That is correct, but we're finding that not all test kits that they have necessarily are being reimbursed or coming from the House. Some are being received free of charge. So we don't have the total in terms of numbers that are being utilized.
Okay. So do you have any data, even anecdotal data, for example, about the recent uptake of the permission to include pandemic fundraising appeals and so on in MP communications?
No, I don't at this time.
Okay. The other thing that you've done is you've provided us with data on the uptake of the home internet reimbursement policy, but do you have the total dollar value of those reimbursements which were made in the previous fiscal year, a number?
Yes, so for the internet, it was around $140,000.
140, okay. And are there any concerns on your part that if we extend the home internet reimbursement policy to a full 3 years since its original approval, that it'll start to be perceived as somehow a permanent component of compensation packages, which with its eventual end causing possible problems?
And that's actually a very good question. So we did look at that very closely in administration. The answer is no,
okay.
Because we do have the ability to adjust compensation packages, and it would be a decision made by the employer.
Okay. if within a unionized environment, how would that happen?
I would
Would
have
that
to pass that question to Madame Laframboise from a union perspective.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if that would involve negotiations, collective bargaining adjustments, or
Typically, in my experience, then it becomes a request that comes from the union, and it's a discussion point between the two parties.
okay. Now, the last point I want to make, before you return to any further renewals of the home internet reimbursement policy, would you be able to do some research on how widely or not it has become in similar an office-based work setting? Would you be able to do that?
We certainly could look out to our colleagues in terms of other government organizations, in terms of their process and practice. Absolutely, that's something we could look at and bring back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Very good. We'll now go to Mr. Julian.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It just not a question, more a comment, and I think Mr. Broussard raised an important issue in terms of test kits. I would share with you, Mr. Speaker, that my mother, because she's in a long-term care facility, that long-term care facility provides test kits, and so my tests take place as a result of the facility providing the free test kits. I think Mr. St. George is absolutely right that a lot of members of Parliament are in a similar situation where they're receiving test kits from other sources, but that shouldn't mean that we cut off the ability to get those test kits through MOBs for some members of Parliament.
Very good. Any comments on that? And I guess if I could interject, I was thinking exactly the same thing, because I know my staff went out to buy some, and I instructed them to go to the nearest pharmacy, and they went in and got them for free and brought them back. Is there any way of, now did all, and I'm not sure if this is even a question that's in line or in your bailiwick, but do we know that all the provinces allowed for citizens to go to pharmacies to pick them up? I'm in Ontario, and that's the way it worked here.
We haven't actually done that review yet, but it's something certainly we could look at. What we're looking at here is essentially just ensuring we have enough within our warehouse or within our vendors' capability to provide it if necessary.
Okay, I'm not saying to take away the option to buy it, but I just pointed out to MPs that they don't have to, well, I was going to say spend federal money, put it on the provinces. That's not exactly the way I was wanting to put it, but basically that's what it comes down to. Very good. Are there any other comments? Very good. Now we're going to go in camera. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we approve the recommendations that have been put forward? Everybody's in accordance? Very good. Now we'll go in camera and deal with item number 7 when we come back. We're going to take about a 2-minute break. Thank you.